I'm pretty confident we're going to transport ourselves beyond the 16th century now for a little while, at least, with our next speaker, Denisa Kera, who's a philosopher and designer who does research on hackerspaces, makerspaces, and publication tools for open and citizen design projects. Welcome, Denisa.
Hi, everyone. It's a great pleasure to talk after people that are in touch with these manuscripts every day. And I want to thank the organizers for inviting me and giving me this opportunity to show some of the work and ways I'm trying to use alchemy for the type of interests I have. And also, it's a special pleasure to be in Holland because one of my inspirations is Cornelius Drebbel, who is actually the guy who invented vermilion. And I'm finding all these connections now, listening to you. So what I'll talk about is one particular connection between art and alchemy, which are these emblems, works of graphics, visualizations, we would call them today, which are alchemical, but actually the scope of my interest is a bit larger. So what you see there is Voynich manuscript, and I will also talk about tarot cards in some moments. So I'm making connections between these emblems and electronic circuits quite for some time now, and it all started a couple of years ago when I developed an obsession with some of my collaborators into circuits as some interesting unit of analysis of the whole 20th and 21st century, because it goes all back to these ideas of cybernetic systems, of inputs and outputs. It's basically something like our most abstract unit of analysis, what is going on with our technologies, with our infrastructure, and at the same time, it's rather metaphysical in a way how it's represented, how it's like even practiced, but it's also very material. So this interest in circuits as a metaphor, for example, in ecology, as a practice in engineering, in all our technology, became something that I started finding some interesting examples of how that metaphor was used and also like doing weird stuff. Here is an example of these circuits, and it's supposed to be a euro sign, what you see back there, and it was a bit like a curiosity-driven research into whether coins are conductive and which coins are more conductive, and I have to say euro is pretty conductive. And it's actually a Joule thief circuit, which is this miraculous circuit that can squeeze electricity from the batteries when they're dead, basically. So it was a bit of a comment to this European debt crisis and things that were going on in Greece that were trying to squeeze the money out of the system. And it was also like this experiment with circuits. So here it's also, for me, the interesting part was the connection and the idea we have about economic systems and circuits. We want them to perform in a similar way in which our electronic circuits do, to have clearly defined inputs and outputs, to be these perfect loops, basically. And it never happens. And then I went a bit further into the material aspect of circuits, and the issue that came out was the issue of etching. So etching is a very interesting technique for all amateur electronic people interested in electronics that make so-called printed circuit boards. And it's one of these good techniques to learn, to understand how all stuff basically works and how electronics works. So I looked back into, and I was thinking like, okay, these techniques of etching are actually print techniques. They're pretty old techniques. And why they're so important in the present? And it's not just the printed circuit boards. Etching as a technique is used for MEMS and for all kinds of new stuff that is going on in science and technology. And I was curious, why does these etching techniques are like somehow coming back, basically? What is this return of the repressed print techniques in an age when we all talk about data and digital technologies and so on? So I went back to one of the first etched prints, which is Albrecht Durer's A Landscape with a Cannon, and I decided to recreate it by imposing basically a circuit on it. So it was supposed to be a print etching, and also it's pretty ugly, which shows my really bad skill as a designer. But I had a lot of fun as a philosopher trying to do it, and also this is one of the prototypes. It's still not done, but that's the stage in which I can, and it worked, that's important. So the circuit which I use there is so-called glycometer. It's one of these basic tools you use in behavioral research, or it's like mouse licking something and closing the circuit. It's basically basic conductance, or you touch something and an LED turns on, and so on. So it's a simple circuit. That was the main reason I picked it up. But also it makes this connection between, I don't know, military technology, the idea of cybernetic systems, which create these closed loops, and also the origins of etching, which is this famous print by Durer. And as you see, here is the cannon. I hope you can see it. And it's a very strange print because it was made from iron, so he etched iron to make the print. And what you see in front is actually a Turk. And there are discussions in art history whether he's depicted as a prisoner or he has like some special status of someone just observing. Is he like a diplomatic visitor maybe, or something of that kind? So it's a very strange print that shows how these original etching techniques, which created maps later, and actually other military technology, we can say. And let's not forget, Durer did teach young aristocrats how to use military technology of his time. You can make basically this genealogical connection between our etching techniques, prints, circuits, and all the stuff after. I don't know, maybe it doesn't make completely sense, these connections I'm making, but it's a way of basically exploring through practice and through theory where you can make the connections, and the reason I'm doing it, because what I like about alchemy is this connection between science, technology, and art. Like, they were not divided, or science and poetry. They were not divided in these practices, and somehow through doing it today, I'm trying to see whether we can do that today with the technologies. Another type of circuits I'm interested in are so-called microfluidic chips or microfluidic designs, which are made from a different type of materials. They're these mineral organic polymers, but also paper. Paper can be used for that. And here you're not moving electrons, but you're moving liquids, you're moving cells, you're moving living organisms, and similar stuff. And I just decided to mention one project done a few years ago in Singapore, where we created these microfluidic plates for basically shadow theater. So we decided to see whether we can recreate some famous figures from Indonesian shadow figures on these microfluidic chips, and see how to make a connection between theater and microfluidics, basically. It didn't go that well, but it was, again, a lot of fun to try and create this connection. So these projects, the status of this interest in circuits, and going back to etching, going back to questions of what are other kinds of circuits we are using today, I finalized it somehow this year while being a visiting professor at Arizona State University, where I worked on this project called Parallel of Futures. And there I decided to use microfluidics and electronic circuits with a team of researchers you see here, and to connect them and see how they can interpret some old iconography. So the iconography we decided to use was all kinds, like Voynich manuscript has these really strange creatures, like these naked ladies in pools. Like the last 1/3 of the book are all kinds of pictures where you see these ladies in pools, and no one really knows what it is. And we decided to do something funny to interpret these nymphs, or maybe their moon phases, like they're definitely encrypting something. We decided to interpret it as a capillary action. So we are still working on this idea of turning these pages through wax on a paper microfluidics, and turning them into basically microfluidics chips, something like projecting the future into the past or similar. We also work with tarot cards because they're aesthetics is also interesting. And we were making these stencil cutted, let's say, paper circuits or cardboard circuits, and playing with the meaning. And with Stormy Nesbitt, a designer from Arizona State, we actually created our own tarot cards. So we have these special tarot cards for 21st century controversies. And I would like to invite you tomorrow, if you're interested in tarot readings about science and technology controversies, we'll do some of it. This is the... We were also we were playing with these cards and with these old symbols by putting them into the deep dream algorithms, even trying to teach the machine, teach the AIs to do tarot card readings, but we didn't have a large set. And there is even an online oracle. This is just something I got yesterday from the oracle, where basically it's a good way to learn JavaScript. And it says, graphene industry consolidates Dodd-Frank Wall Street reform, which is a reform that has to do a lot with minerals and how to ethically use minerals and mine minerals from Africa. So I don't know how these nanotech technologies will interact with minerals, but my oracle is saying that that's the future. Okay, I'll try to see whether I can play the video that explains the process. Okay. Mm-hmm.
Inspired by the 15th century Tarot de Marseille, we made the 21st century tarot cards, which perform using conductive materials, various electronic circuits, and paper microfluidics. Through them, we explored the current IoT and lab-on-a-chip fantasies, such as automatization and optimization of our homes, cities, but also bodies and lives. With 3 specially designed tarot decks and 2 automated oracles, we also conduct public one-to-one readings on issues of science and technology controversies, climate change, or the future of food. We took, for example, the old card of temperance and transformed its 2 cups balancing and mixing the material and spiritual worlds into a microfluidics chip. Its microchannels made of wax, mix liquids, but also balance our expectations about science, becoming more accessible, reproducible, and open. The card of the temperance becomes a prototype of paper microfluidics, including a contact detector circuit, which performs speculations on the future use of such technologies. Will we carry around our organs on a chip like little homunculi to test meditation and environmental conditions on the go? Will we stream such live biodata in real time? Will these lab-on-a-chip technologies maybe become voodoo dolls, making all threats more personal and personalized? Are we creating conditions for extreme biosurveillance or even future data wars with such?
Okay, so I'll continue, hopefully. And there you got an idea how we work with the iconography of the old card, translating it into some tools and symbols that are known in the present and connecting the circuits with the microfluidics. So why I'm doing this, or where is the connection? Why alchemical emblems and these like new circuits? First of all, because they do have this abstract layer of representation, which I'll show in a minute, because they are like abstract, but they're also very material. They drive all our biotechnologies, electronics, and all the tools we use. And in a similar way, the alchemical symbols in the past, they were description of processes, of real material practices you could do in the lab with the minerals, and also poetic, beautiful descriptions referring to religion, sexual imagery, and name it, what was there. Another reason which I really see as important is that both these old emblems and circuits today are basically creating and representing relations between different scales. Something from what you mentioned in the beginning. They're a form of material speculations, and Yarrow mentioned it. They go from the soil to the stars, or they connect the sphere of the human with the non-human planetary, molecular, mineral scales. So this interest in the aesthetic, cosmological, erotic, political references hidden in these old images of illuminations with these present circuit schematics are basically the connections I'm trying to make with this practice. And also it's just like a playful use of electronics and occult symbols, components, alternate new etching techniques, and so on. So there are people that do something similar, and I think maybe it's even more cool. Like personally, I'm in love with this project, this grimoire for autonomous vehicles. And it's called Autonomous Trap. And what the artist James Bridle did, he basically created this like magical circuit around the autonomous vehicle from salt, which is usually this material of protection. And he used the sign, which means stop, and he just circled it around, so he confuses autonomous vehicles. And I think it's a brilliant use. And I see the reference to the Solomon keys, which was a very important magical emblems back to the, I think, 15th century. There are many versions of it where they were also trying to invoke different forces and seek for protection or power. There are also like more funny examples. Here is something I've seen in Jerusalem in 2015. It's an amulet to protect cars against parking fines. And it's in the market, in Jerusalem market. So here you see like cosmology being connected with this Kabbalah letter number relations and parking problems, which are things connected to our cars and human behavior. So all these circuits which we see behind our machines are, for me, a form of these alchemical emblems. Here is an example I decided to pick up from something from a recent project I really like. It's basically a shield connected to this foil, which can be used for wearable technology. So you can put all kinds of sensors, get data, turn on LEDs, and so on. So it uses like Arduino, then it uses a shield for some radio, I don't know whether Bluetooth, I'm not certain, or wireless signals. And then the most important thing is this foil, basically, which you can connect to all kinds. It's a foldable foil, and you can connect it. And it has a beautiful aesthetic part. So it's not just technology, it's not just a tool. It's trying to be beautiful. It's trying to make reference to caterpillars and flowers, and it's trying to be soft and hard. It tries to use the minerals in this like original context. And when I look at it, it does remind me to these alchemist attempts. Here is like a 16th century circuit, basically, from Nazari's books about transformations of humans and minerals. And here this circuit he describes, it's a strange combination. He describes the work on the alchemical, like the creation of the gold or the creation of that perfect matter that the alchemists are attempting. And he describes that it's a profound secret of nature. You will see that this king, our son, is generated by the first father, multiplied by the second, and brought to perfection by the third father. So there is a very strange relation between who is the father and who is the son. It's almost like a soap opera when you read it. But then he introduces like more metaphors of a sourdough, hipsterish bread, where you need the yeast, the flour, and the water to make bread. And the way he works with these materials maybe explains the paradoxical way they were thinking about this alchemist practice, which could be about mineral, it could be about your body, it could be about cosmology, it could be about everyday things. But it is this ability to make these connections, which are poetic, erotic, political in many ways, and also depict them depict this relation between different scales and this ability to bring this holistic thinking through this like circuit. I have another one I just couldn't resist from Nazari, who I find like fascinating. Here is another way of depicting these three: mercury, sulfur, and salt, which is a later Paracelsian interpretation of the original, let's say, dualism. You see them here at the top, and this thing here is basically nature or a dragon or these things which you are supposed to tame as an alchemist to make the connection between your body, the minerals, and the universe. And he again uses this very paradoxical, surrealist language of this thing being a hen, but also a dragon, something which revives itself by killing itself. And then he has this beautiful, I would say, like transnational, multicultural references that it's known to all people, races and tribes, so the poor as well as the rich can have access, and they called it worthless, and countless other names and epithets. And it ends with, I'm a stranger in my own country, but known to all climates of the world. So there are some really strange political themes going on behind these representations of chemical processes. So I'm not certain how to read for me, the interesting things are the emblems and how they try to make connection between something very small, hidden minerals, very, let's say, on a scale of atoms for us today, and something very big like planetary or cosmological and so on. And I think the circuits and this is my last slide, the circuits we are designing today and all our technology in some deep level is trying to do the same, basically. I see them just as the latest alchemical emblems on the side of how they represent the circuit, but also in what they are trying to create. They try to connect minerals from the ground with our political systems, with, we try to build rockets on these circuits, we try to go to the other planets and so on. So I see them as something that connects the world of metals and humans, creates interaction across scales, and exercise plurality and hybridity.
Thanks. That's great. Does anyone have any questions right off the top? No, I wanted to ask you to actually explain what microfluidics is for those who might not know, because I thought that was a potentially, deep topic.
So the only reason I needed to explain it is that we tried that in the Taro project, but maybe it was not so important. But I see it's a technique which tries to recreate complicated and expensive experiments in the lab on a level of a little chip, which can be made from paper or some like this strange polymer like PDMS, or some, it's basically a cheaper way of doing science experiments because you use very small droplets of liquid and then you use what is called capillary reaction or surface tension that exist on such small scale. So, the liquids can move to each other and interact. And basically the way they interact, you see some reaction. What normally in the lab you would use like big equipment and it's more expensive. So it's like this new scientific technique, how to do science experiments, mostly in biology. So to see how things interact and similar. So it's that. I hope it's a lab on a chip technology. That's the
lab on a chip. Yeah, that's a nice way of summing it up. Yeah. I had a thought, especially I guess as you were walking us through your projects that are kind of reconfiguring or rewriting some heavy symbolism from things like tarot and other places. Where is this going to go? Where is your research headed in terms of other areas of symbolism or other integrations between circuits and this kind of imagery?
So the main reason I'm looking into the old symbolism from Voynich to Alchemist, I see them as all very similar, is because they try to connect scales from the molecular to the planetary, and they try to bring the synthesis to make it relevant to you for whatever reasons you find. So it is this interest in connecting science and poetry that drives my research into emblems and all this like strange old iconography. And, I'm actually disinterpreting the circuits through these alchemist images, maybe.
It's like a sort of a revitalization of that, because in a way, as you demonstrate by the images you're showing and by the other images we saw earlier this morning, this was always a thing, and now we've perhaps lost that a little bit, and now it's coming back together through work like yours.
So just to end like this, all alchemist instruments were actually models how the universe works. So when they make the furnace, it's the mountain in which the minerals, through volcanic activity or through some heat, they imagine there happen. So all instruments, or Cornelius Drebbel was creating the first incubator. So for him, it was a perpetuum mobile machine. So they were trying to create prototypes of how the world works. So even instruments had this ability to synthesize their interests from cosmology to religion to science to poetry.
Thanks very much, Denisa.